Well, good afternoon. Welcome to another video with a guy and his projects. Today we are working with my wife's sister's husband, so technically brother-in-law, I guess, on his brand spanking new F150. This is a 2020, freaking fancy. How many miles are on this thing?
I've already put about 700 miles on it.
Less than 1,000 miles. We're already replacing parts. That's what you get with Ford. Just kidding. We're upgrading. Jordan, what are we doing to your truck today?
Okay, so this is a kit. It's a 6112 front coilover kit made by Bilstein shocks. It's basically going to raise the front end of this truck about 2 inches so that we get rid of the factory rig. These Ford trucks are really bad and they have a ton of forward nosedive. That's what we're doing today. That's kind of phase one, and we'll see how it goes, and hopefully all goes well.
What's phase two?
Phase two, we're actually going to be putting the same brand shock on the back of the truck. It's the 5160s, I believe is what they're called. They're on back order, so we don't have them yet. But once those come in, we'll put those in the back, so I got full aftermarket all the way around. And after that, we'll be doing all kinds of fun overland stuff, but that'll come later.
That's stage 25.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, pretty much what he said. We're replacing the front coilovers. This same method will apply regardless of whether you're 2015, 2020, your shocks are worn out, your springs are worn out, or they're not. Obviously, they're not here. But if you're just doing a routine upgrade or a routine replacement, this process will remain the same. So if you want to see it, make sure you stick around. Let's get started. Okay.
Cool.
All right, so this is the Bilstein, as we mentioned, Bilstein, Bilstein, I don't care. 6112 kit for the 2015 to 2020 Ford F150. I will put a link in the description below, as well as the top pinned comment. We'll have a link to this. I do earn on qualifying purchases, keep that in mind. So inside this kit, we have our fancy brand spanking new springs. They look sexy. You've got your two different shocks. Let's see if we can slide one out real quick, just to get an idea of what we're up against. This is the bottom, goes on your lower control arm, and this is going to go into your top hat and your bucket. So you have this little ring here. This is how you adjust your lift height. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different settings. I'm guessing these are in half-inch increments. So this bottom one here would be stock height up to half, 1, 1.5, 2 inches. That actually makes sense, and I just made it up. So we're going with that as truth. But that's pretty much all you got in this kit. It's a very simple kit, but it is going to make a world of difference on this truck. Step one, we removed these little tiny bolts here from the brake lines. This is going to be your brake line and your ABS line. They're attached to the knuckle. You're going to want them to be able to flex later, so go ahead and remove them. One's an 8mm, the other is a 10mm bolt. So just go ahead and pull those out. Now you have some flexibility here. Continuing on the same lines, go ahead and cut any zip ties that are holding them up. Essentially, we're going to drop that lower control arm and knuckle quite a ways down, so this will allow the brake lines to flex rather than snap, which is a much better option, obviously. So go ahead and pull those off. Next, we're going to do your sway bar end link. Go ahead and just pop that upper bolt off. You don't need to mess with the bottom one, just get the upper. This will just allow, again, to drop. Grab a flathead screwdriver and pop this dust cover off of your CV axle nut. This nut behind here, all it does is hold the CV in place. So when I say all it does, I mean it's actually a pretty important job, but it's a pretty simple process. So just pop it loose, and it's a 14mm, I believe. And now we can go ahead and do your tie rod end link. Go ahead and pop that bolt out as well. Seems like a lot of steps, I know, but it's all pretty simple. It's not too much to worry about. You may have to beat on that a little bit more. This truck is still brand new, so nothing is seized together yet per se. Alright, so these are the bolts going to the studs on the actual coil over underneath your control arm. Go ahead and remove both of those. And with your 18 and 21 millimeter wrenches, go ahead and loosen, do not remove, but loosen the upper control arm. You're going to do both sides, right and left, front and back, whichever you want to call it. On the back side, we had to use a deep dish ratchet socket combo to bust it loose due to stuff in the way, but that actually made it easier, so there you are. Okay, once you are loosened, I put a floor jack underneath the control arm just to support the weight when we pop the upper control arm bolt off. This is the ball joint on the upper control arm. If you have to leave the nut on a little bit so you can beat on it to get this loose, I would do so. Don't beat on it without the nut, you might damage the threads. As you can see here, now we can beat on it until it pops off. Boom, the jack is underneath the knuckle, so you still need to support the top of it, but the weight of the knuckle is supported by the jack. I'm going to let this fall out of the way. Make sure your brake lines are loose. Alright, for the coil bucket, up here you have 3 different nuts holding this in place. Go ahead and bust all of those off. Like I said, there's 3 of them. Important to note, also pay attention to the orientation. These are not evenly spread out. 2 of them are closer than the other. It kind of forms a triangle. You're going to want to pay attention to that for later. Go ahead and tighten your control arm back in the upwards position so you don't have to fight with it being in your way. You don't have to crank down on it, just tighten it so that it stays there. Alright, we used a second person here to go ahead and pull the coilover out because we had to push down on that lower control arm. If you loosen the lower control arm, I would be willing to bet that that would give you enough clearance. We just decided to have the Jordan here help out. Alright, so now the fun part. When I say fun, I mean this takes forever. Grab your spring compressors, whatever you might have. It is recommended on the new springs to not use this style spring clamp because of the pressure it takes. However, this is all I have in my garage, so this is what we used. Go ahead and get them in place. Also, you are not supposed to use an impact to tighten these up, I believe. However, it takes 6 years to do with the impact, let alone not the impact. Obviously, I cut a lot of footage out there of tightening. Once your spring is compressed enough, though, go ahead and come up here, and this top nut you can remove. You're going to have to use a combination of a vise or your foot and a crescent wrench and your 17 millimeter wrench to get this off. It's quite twisty, and if you don't hold it in all 3 places, it will spin on you and you will not make very good progress, as I found out. So, once you get this loosed, make sure your spring is compressed before you pull this nut off. That could be a bad day if not. So now this top hat comes off. Boom, boom, voila. And your spring is now free to come out. Keeping in mind it is still compressed. Now you can go through and loosen your spring compressor. That took a lot longer. I cut some footage. We're going to go ahead and remove the, I don't know what you want to call it, the foam seat. And for the new setup to work, this little dust cover has to come off, so we just sliced it in half, down lengthwise, and popped it out. Boom, just like so. It's just plastic. Grab your new shock, or strut, whatever you want to call it. And I have these special pliers linked down in the description below for the snap rings. This is not your typical eyelet snap ring. This is a flat-edged snap ring, so you need a flat-edged piece of pliers that will get to it. And this is a balancing act. May take you more than 1 try, may take you more than 5 tries. I've done a few of these, and with these pliers it makes it way nicer to do. We're putting these on the far up setting as high as they can go. This is your spring perch. That's going to sit on top of that snap ring, all nice and perfect. You're going to have this rubber bump stop. This goes on the top of your whatchamacallit thingy-majiggy. Keep in mind, I'm not a mechanic. And just muscle it on there. I would resist the urge to use soap to make it loose, because then it will, you know, be loose later as well. Grab your brand new spring, and now you're going to start the long process of compressing these. Again, I cut out a lot of footage because it's just me sitting there with the impact trying to compress these springs. But you'll get the idea. Set them up, get them tight, and then alternate each side so that you don't get too much bend in one side and not the other. Ultimately, when these are compressed, you want them to stay straight. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and put this in, boop, just like so. And the flat end of the spring, it's pretty obvious which side goes where, but there's only one way for this part to fit on here. And keep in mind with this top hat which way your bolts were orientated on your previous setup, because that will matter when we go back in. As you'll see, those two studs on the left are closer together than the one on the far right. That is important. Alright, get your retaining nut for the top hat. Go ahead and put that on. Again, I don't know that an impact is recommended for this job. However, I'm an impatient person and the ratchet was taking too long, so I impacted it on. I guarantee you that is not the way you are supposed to do it. So again, follow me at your own discretion. Once all that is tightened up, you can take your spring clamps off and reinstall. And this is where having those studs up top oriented properly matters, because your bolt holes on the bottom will not line up if you do it backwards. Go ahead and put your nuts on. Funny story, we actually forgot to tighten these later. Do not forget to tighten those. Poor guy was driving down the road and had some clanking going on and figured out that we did not tighten those. You can do some fine-tune adjusting to get these to line up with a pipe wrench or some channel locks or whatever you got handy. And then once lined up, you should be able to pop these bolts down nice and smoothly, or in our case, you know, almost smoothly. Just tap them on down. Boop. There you go. And of course, the other side as well. And don't forget, if you're having issues, it's not always a side-to-side adjustment. Sometimes you just might need to pop the control arm down, just like so. So this will look like I'm actually moving this strut, but I'm actually pushing the control arm down with this screwdriver to fit that bolt in. Alright, now you got your retaining nuts to hold those in place on the bottom. Go ahead and slap both of those in. And you can put your knuckle back in place on the upper control arm. Again, we're using the floor jack to help us out, support the weight of that knuckle, and or to lift it back up so we can put the bolt in. Voila. Just like so. And get your nut back on. Alright, now your retaining nut for your CV axle. Go ahead and slap that in. Okay, make sure you start this by hand. All of your nuts and bolts always start by hand so you know you're not cross-threading. Now you can take your tie rod, slap that back in place, and put your nut on there as well. Notice we're not really torquing any of this down, we're just getting it in place. It's up to you how you want to go. Your sway bar end link as well. And now we are going to start tightening everything to your manufacturer specifications. Check out the foot support right there. Yeah. Use your brain and your limbs. So we tightened down both the strut bolts. Now we're tightening down your sway bar link as well as your tie rod end. Now your upper control arm ball joint. and use your crescent wrench to hold that stud. As it is a ball joint, it will spin a lot of times, most of the time actually. So you use your crescent wrench and a speed wrench, or ratchet wrench, whatever you want to call these, and go ahead and slap those down. Now you're going to do your upper control arm, and you're going to tighten that to your manufacturer specifications, whatever those might be as well. Boom, boom. Alright, and move on to your rear side, left side, whatever you want to call it. Get your ratchet and tighten it down. Don't forget the coil bucket top hat bolts and nuts, as we did. Alright, and your dust cap for your CV bolt right there, all nice and purty. Now we're going to go ahead and take our brake lines and ABS lines and electrical and all that and tighten those back in with those two little bolts right here and right here. And guys, we are almost done. Upgraded shocks, the process is the same for just your standard replacement shocks, don't forget that. We finished cutting off these zip ties from earlier, and go ahead and zip tie these lines back in place. Might seem ghetto, but honestly they work out real good. Zip tie back in place, make it look pretty, and your other line here as well. Zippity doo that in place, boom boom, cut it nice and pretty. Alright guys, put your tires back on. If you liked what you saw, make sure you leave me a thumbs up. If you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. I got plenty of videos. I got a few more on this truck. We do the upper control arms, the rear shocks, new aftermarket upper control arms, rear aftermarket Bilstein shocks as well with the reservoirs. And yeah, I have a whole playlist dedicated to F150s of a few different year ranges, so check it out. I also have all the parts linked down in the description below, as well as a PayPal support me link. Check it out. Thanks guys, really do appreciate your viewership, appreciate your subscribership. Remember, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.